I hear often, and I think this is, well, actually, before I say it, I'm curious on your take on it. So I often hear that, curiosity-driven science is useless. It gets very harsh. I mean, and nowadays media, environment, you hear most of the time the extremes and nuances out the window. So I often hear, curiosity-driven science is useless. We need application. We need application. We need application. And do you think, because the field of computational psychiatry is, in my mind, brand new, and do you think this is an example of why curiosity-driven science is actually not useless?
Yeah. So it's so you're saying quite a lot. I think it's true that there's a bit of shift of attention. I think with people in general wanting to see kind of a justification of basic science. I do think there is some nuance out there. So more and more people, also politicians, are recognizing that the knowledge base is kind of key for any societal impact on the long term. So that we should make sure that also curiosity-driven science, basic science, fundamental science is funded sufficiently. So yeah, I think it's a little bit more nuanced. I think computational psychiatry is a sort of nice in-between example, because on the one hand, there is theoretically a promise of computational psychiatry to have impact on people's mental health. But I think we have to be really careful. Like the example I just gave of a proxy model ultimately predicting drug efficacy, before we can apply that and actually use it in the clinic, we're going to be, many, many years ahead.
Right. And we need to make sure it works.
I don't think it's realistic. I don't think it's realistic that we're going to apply this like within the next 5 years. And that is because the problems people suffer from, and because are so multidimensional, they're so extremely complex. So maybe I can get a proxy model of dopamine, but that's not going to solve the subjective problem.
Right.
So we're and it's like a huge problem, right? This relationship between the mind and the brain. So, and I think most people in this budding field of computational psychiatry really are driven. Most researchers are driven to understand the mechanisms of psychiatric disorders, psychiatric abnormalities, and their treatment. And so they're and try and decompose this subjective experience into things that we can quantify, with an ultimate aim to maybe advance mental health, but not in the direct. Like, we can't really promise anyone that we're going to have some delivery within the next 3 years. I think that's not realistic. So for the actual practitioner, I mean.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's so complex. So, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it is very complex, and it's not like you just develop some software that someone can use. This is really this is impacting people's health, and there should be there are very stringent rules on what is allowed, what is not allowed, and a battery of tests that have to be done with any type of treatment have to be checked first before it just gets pushed out as something new, and this works just fine.
Exactly. Severe, serious clinical trialing has to be done, and we have to be careful also for the sort of abuse of these, right? Because you don't want anyone, any sort of company or whatever practitioner or anyone to go, well, let me just measure your smartphone use for the next 3 weeks, and then I'll sort of demonstrate that you will benefit from a cognitive enhancing drug. And so it's easy to also come up with a number of ethical challenges there. So we have to be quite careful to implement this prematurely.
Right. So you would say that, sure, the applied science is important, but curiosity driven comes first, because it's if you think, well, I'm wondering if that is how you see it, because it's if you always think of the application at first, I don't know if that would limit the exploration.
If it would always go that direction, it would limit the exploration. But I'm very much in favor of this sort of dual route. So I don't think the great innovations of today all follow a linear model where you start with fundamental science and then the applications sort of magically appear. I do think it's a sort of two-way interaction.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of emphasis on co-creation these days, and I think that's very valuable. But I do think there's also value in pure fundamental science. So just a trajectory of science that's not taking into account possible applications. But I don't think all innovations have to start with the fundamental science, for sure. I think there's many, many examples of where, discovery is driven by the market or
the applicable problem first, and then
of course the problem, the challenge,
the research is done.
Yeah, and it can be an economic one or a societal problem.